One of the biggest reasons why technology projects run over time and over budget is because the technology projects are treated as just software implementations. Instead, they should be treated as a true business transformation program. But what's the difference between these two? That's what I'm going to talk about here today. My name is Eric Kimberling. I'm the CEO of Third Stage Consulting. We're an independent tech-agnostic consulting firm that helps clients all over the world with their digital transformation projects. And being a tech-agnostic provider and service provider like we are, we see all the time organizations that get sucked into this trap of thinking that they're implementing software when in fact it's truly a business transformation program. A lot of times organizations don't fully understand that there's a lot more to a project than what a software vendor proposes to you. And there's some responsibility and a lot of responsibility that the client needs to focusing on the overall business transformation program. Now, this is a big part of what we do with helping our clients establish their PMO and the overall program is understanding what the overall business transformation looks like. So what I want to do today is share with you what a program looks like versus the actual project. And I want to do this in a way that helps you understand so that you can create a complete project team, a realistic plan, a realistic budget, and realistic expectations around the project, and that's what we'll dive into here today. If you'd like to learn more about how to make your digital transformation successful, be sure to read our Lessons from 1000 Digital Transformations ebook. It's something you can find on our website. Just scan the QR code right here or go to the links below. So let's start with software project. I think this is probably the most intuitive for most of us, understanding what a software project is. And think of this box right here in a project org chart is the box that a software vendor or system integrator is going to propose to you. So this is going to include essentially the basic stuff like designing and building software. It's going to include other things like software testing. And it'll also include some basic change management things like training, any sort of customization that you might do as a team would all be included here. And essentially what happens is a software vendor will propose this stuff. This is what they're going to say when they come up with their timeline, with their resource estimate, their cost, et cetera, et cetera. But how is that different from an overall transformation program? Well, in addition to there being multiple other work streams that you've got to think about, you also have to start at the top level and look at what is an overall program. What's the responsibility of a business transformation program? This is going to include things like I mentioned, the enterprise program management. So setting up decision frameworks, establishing governance and controls around the project, making major business decisions. Those are all things that don't typically happen down here at the software level, and nor should they. So in addition to ePMO, you have decision making, you have governance, and you have controls. So this establishes the overall framework for the rest of the program. What I want to do in the rest of this video is talk about what those different components of the remainder of the program are and why they're so important, so critical to the overall success of your project. So let's start looking at the different pieces that are missing from this overall program. We talked about the software project, we talked about the business transformation program and the governance that goes behind that, but there's also other things that need to be included in this program. First and foremost is other technology. So this includes a number of things. You're going to have additional software. So in other words, most projects don't entail just one software. Most projects entail at least one or more other systems that need to interface with the core software being implemented. So for example, even if you're implementing an ERP system like an SAP or an Oracle, Microsoft D365, whatever it is, you're typically not just deploying that one core ERP, you're also deploying other types of software as well. And when you deploy other software, whether it's legacy systems that you're going to connect with or other third-party bolt-ons to address the gaps in the core system you might be implementing, you also have to look at things like the architecture, data, and integration. So I'll just call it architecture for now, but this is going to include all the stuff that enables all the technology to work together. So the integration, the data management, data migration, and all these things need to tie together. So this typically is not something that's handled by your software project provider, but someone's got to do it, and that's why this piece is such an important part of the overall business transformation program. Now, we've talked about how the different technology components are typically more complex than just one work stream within a program, But what's even more complex is the non-technical aspects, and that's what I'll get to through the rest of this video. Now, in addition to technology, a true business transformation program, at least a successful one, is also going to include business process management. And I would say this is an extremely underrated work stream because most project teams, or a lot of project teams and software vendors, will think that by simply implementing technology, that's going to determine what your business processes are. There's two problems with this. First of all, most of the time, this software, whatever technology you're deploying, is not going to solve all your problems, and it's not going to be a perfect fit for what you need. So there are major decisions that need to be made in terms of how your business processes are going to look going forward. The other thing that's so important is because there's so many process decisions that need to be made around standardizing processes, around improving processes, perhaps rolling out AI to redefine what business processes might look like. So there's a lot of different changes, a lot of different things that need to happen within business process management. So this entails major process decisions, which, by the way, some of those will be enabled by technology, but a lot of those, if not most of them, should be driven by your overall business, your overall strategy. So these process decisions need to involve your steering committee and the overall EPMO in making some of those decisions. And these are decisions that need to be made in a way that drives the technology rather than assuming the technology is going to drive the business for you. So process decisions are important. Changes are important, defining what those improvements are. And also, this leads into the next and the final work stream I'll talk about, the change impacts. And this is operational and organizational change impacts. So here's where we look at the difference between the current state and the future state so that we can implement those changes, not just from a technology perspective, but also from a role and responsibility perspective and from a general operational perspective. With that all being said, there's one more work stream that's very important to this overall business transformation program, and that's what I'll talk about next. So the final work stream that you need to think about when you're defining an overall transformation program is your change management. And think of change management as really where the rubber meets the road. It's where you truly enable and connect the wires between technology, your operations, and then the people and the change management side of things is what makes it all reality. Without this piece here, this is all theoretical. It's all just a bunch of flow charts and requirements documents, technology that might work if you push the right buttons, but it's not going to work for your business until you've got proper change management. Now, change management goes well beyond training. I talked over here about how vendors and system integrators will oftentimes do some limited training, but this is train the trainer, which is fine that it's train the trainer, but we don't need a bunch of trained trainers. We need employees that are trained. So this is where change management comes in, because this is typically the team that has to now facilitate this entire process of taking what the software vendors have imparted upon the trainers and now facilitate the training of people en masse. So training is one of the key ones. You've also got general communications. What's changing? Why are we changing? How does it affect me? What's in it for me? What can I expect in my new role? What does my new role look like? All those things are really important from a communications perspective. You don't want to just do project communication and talk about different milestones and progress and how great things are going. That's sort of important, but what's really important to the average employee is how it affects them and what their job is going to look like in the future, which leads to something I talked about earlier, which is change impacts. Change impacts is something that's critical to change management because we have to enable the change impacts. And the way we do that is, first of all, we define what they are, but second of all, now we can start to unpack for people what their jobs are going to look like, what their processes are going to look like, how technology is going to look different for them. Those are all big changes that isn't going to be handled by these other work streams. And then even before you do a lot of this work, you're also going to do an org readiness assessment. So this is where we look at where the sources of resistance are going to be, what the root causes of those resistance might be, and how we're going to mitigate those things. And then finally, the biggest thing perhaps is the overall change strategy, which takes all of these different pieces into one cohesive strategy, and that's something that needs to be baked into the overall program. And again, this is stuff that is not typically covered by your software vendor and your implementers, and it's something that is going to make your project absolutely critical. So I'd love to hear from you. What do you think is the most important part of an overall business transformation? And maybe comment too in the field below, whether or not you think your project is actually a software project or if it's a business transformation program. I'd love to hear your feedback on how your project is going so far. And again, if you'd like to learn more about how to make your project successful and learn from other projects that have been through a similar journey as you, be sure to read our ebook called Lessons from 1,000 Digital Transformations. You can find that book by scanning the QR code right here or go to the links below. So I hope you found this information useful and hope you have a great day.